Well, they say an ugly win is better than a pretty loss, and that is certainly what Michigan had last week with the double overtime victory over Army. As the Blades beat writer Ashley Bastock joins us now. And Ashley, we talked about this last week. We talked about the fact that this could be a trap game because of the way Army plays, and really, Army got exactly what they wanted out of this game with the exception of coming out on the short end of the scoreboard.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely did. They took this game into double overtime. It's literally exactly what the Black Knights came to Ann Arbor hoping to get, I think. So it went about as well for them as it could have gone, and they made Michigan's offense look kind of silly at points. Obviously, defensively, the only touchdowns they got were on Michigan turnovers, which, again, goes back to making the offense look a little bit inept at times. So I think it was really a best-case scenario for them, and not exactly a worst-case scenario for Michigan, because that would have been a loss in week 2, and then it's like, well, where does the season go from here? But it was an interesting game, I thought, to say the least.
And this is an Army team that very easily could go on and win 10 more games and be a 10-win victory or 10-win team. And so when we get into November and we start talking about style points, it might not look quite as ugly as it does now in September. Right. I'm tempted to throw out all the results because it's Army, and we knew Army was going to make things difficult, but there are a couple of things that happened to Michigan against Army that also happened against Middle Tennessee, which makes you wonder if it's trends. And you touched on one, the turnovers, and also the failure to capitalize in short yardage situations. Yeah,
the turnovers are, I think, probably the biggest issue on this team right now. I think it's the biggest issue that they feel is the biggest issue, right? Like, Jim Harbaugh talked about it pretty extensively after the Army game on Saturday. Shea Patterson talked about it pretty extensively after week 1 against Middle Tennessee, saying, I have to hold on to the ball. At the end of the day, it comes down to me, which is true. On Saturday, what we saw, the issues were a little bit different. Against Middle Tennessee, the running backs were perfect 100% in blitz pickups. They were not a perfect 100% in blitz pickups against Army. That was what caused Shea Patterson's second fumble. Christian Turner missed a big blitz pickup, and Shea Patterson essentially got blindsided there and strip sacked, lost the ball. So I think that's definitely a big issue. Josh Gaddis, today, meeting with the media on Monday, said, you know, we're not seeing that in practice, which to me is almost a little bit more concerning, because now it's like, well, how do you fix that if these guys aren't turning it over in practice? What's the root cause? So I think really this bye week, Michigan needs to figure that out.
Something else Josh Gaddis said a little bit interesting, Shea Patterson battling an oblique injury. Now, we saw against Middle Tennessee, he left the game a couple of times. They brought in Dylan McCaffrey against Army. He looked like he had a cramping issue, but that oblique maybe explains why he perhaps wasn't giving as much of some power on his throws, and maybe was a little bit more of a touch throw on some of those balls. And with that wind you had in Ann Arbor on Saturday, that maybe caused some of those throws to sail.
Yeah, I agree. And Josh Gaddis went as far to say as that oblique injury happened on the first play of the Middle Tennessee game. So Shea Patterson has been banged up for each of these 2 games now, if we are to believe that, and he's probably in some pain and some discomfort. He hasn't really spoken directly about the injury. Even after the Middle Tennessee game, he's not the one who brought it up. Jim Harbaugh did. So I think that definitely has led to some of the issues. But I think we could still see Dylan McCaffrey, even when Shea Patterson is 100% healthy with this oblique injury. They seem to not want to give up the idea of these 2 quarterback packages. Dylan McCaffrey talked about it last week, said he thinks there's still some potential there. Josh Gaddis brought it up again on Monday. So we'll see how much, if at all, we see those 2 QB packages again. I personally think that we shouldn't, because they didn't really work and seem tricky for the sake of being tricky, but Michigan sounds like they're not ready to give up on them yet.
Second straight game, no Donovan Peoples-Jones, no John Runyon. So taking those 2 guys out of the equation, is that maybe why we didn't see quite as much of the speed and space against Army?
I mean, I think it might be. I think Michigan has a pretty strong receiving core either way, even without him. You see Nico Collins and Tariq Black, when those guys are in, they're really productive. But Donovan Peoples-Jones is the type of player, the type of athlete that can alter a game, that I think this offense could look significantly different. Ryan Hayes had a great first game. I don't think he necessarily had a great second game. I think in the first half especially, he struggled. I think Jalen Mayfield on the other side in the right tackle position looked a little fatigued to me in some of the protections and some of the blocking. But I think, you know, once you get those 2 veteran guys back who could really impact this offense, things could look different. But I also am starting to wonder, given how different the offense looked from week 1 to week 2, more experimental versus more conservative, if Michigan really knows where it wants to go with this offense on a week-to-week basis now.
And this offense dysfunction is kind of overshadowing the strength of this Michigan team, and that's the defense. And considering all they lost both on the field and in the coaching box from the defensive staff last year, the fact that this defense has performed as well as they had is pretty remarkable. You look at this Army team, only 14 points in regulation, and those, as you said, came off of turnovers. Defense really did a good job against Army.
Yeah, I agree, and I think Don Brown agrees. He said on Monday that it was a great performance by this defense. And I think, the offense was the story for Michigan coming into this season. And really through 2 games, I think the defense has been what's bailed this team out. So they, I think, came into this season with a chip on their shoulder where they were like, we know what people are saying about us. We know the names that we lost, but we're more than just names. Like, we're a team and we want to come together and prove people wrong. And I think they've done that and have come up with some big plays. I know we were talking before we came out here about the Josh Metellus, what should have been a fumble recovery that Don Brown said they got hosed on, I believe was the phrasing he used. And they've continued to make some big plays. The Lavert Hill interception against Army, also a huge play that I think is maybe getting overlooked a little bit. And I think, if they keep doing that, then the offense has a little bit of leeway that I think fans maybe don't want to see that leeway right now that they're being given and see the defense bailing them out. But it never hurts when you're putting in a whole new system to have your defense to fall back on.
Yeah, that Metellus play I think is really overlooked because if that play was called correctly on the field, all of a sudden Michigan's up 14-7 in the second quarter instead of trailing 14-7 at halftime. You take a 7-point lead into halftime against Army, it's a whole different game than being down 7 at half against the Black Knights. Exactly.
So I think, there's a lot of factors in that game that led to overtime. And, there's the 4th and short situations in the fourth quarter and Michigan deciding to go for it on the Army 19 instead of kicking a field goal to put them ahead. And Jim Harbaugh and Josh Gaddis have both said the analytics told the Wolverines to do that, but have offered no explanation beyond that. So what those analytics are exactly, not sure, but that's what they said. So they, felt comfortable in going with those situations. And on 4th and short, they had that 3 times in the Army game, and they only converted 1 of them. So who knows how the analytics will change heading into conference play.
And Michigan's defense will certainly be tested in their next game. Of course, they have this weekend off, but then they take on Wisconsin. Badgers off to a typical Wisconsin start. We'll have much more on that Wisconsin matchup coming up next week on College Football Weekly. Ashley, thanks for joining us.
Thanks.